My hope is that we are, one of my hopes, all saints in the making. Not that we're there yet, but that we're on our way. We're in training, we're in the classroom, and you know this is my view, don't you? And it hangs, well, at least it follows automatically from the notion of, in my mind, a God that is all-powerful and loves all. And from our drive point of view, in particular, loves us. And it's that thought, that trust, that hope, that choice of believing that is invaluable to us in practice. And we can really only find that out by doing it, although we might get some indication of such from listening to someone like Marshall, who is particularly advocating such. Well, I give this context so that you understand my next statement, which is I am staggered how, in my due to being against my original will, of course, single, free to preoccupy myself with what we might, broadly speaking, call spiritual matters. As you know by now, I've been I won't say a devotee, not that, but certainly a very close and serious follower of Paramahansa for some decades, and a chap who wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, and some decades also, even simultaneously in my understanding, of being very following of the Christian religion, although, again, I wouldn't say a devotee to much of its theology. And I've had decades of being focused on the red letter stuff in King James Bible. In other words, the supposed words of Jesus and teachings. But protecting myself at the same time from worshipping Jesus as God, and coming increasingly to the view that no, it's an incredibly helpful story that blesses us. Now, in that line of understanding, I might say that my recordings are a bit like a spiritual diary, or at least a trace of my travels, if you like, here and now, in the now, my spiritual experiences as I see it unfolding. And in particular, of course, and this is very individual, your path might be quite individually quite different, and could well be, most likely. Mine has been an astonishing blessing from doing these recordings for YouTube. And I've done so many, as you now know, and they cover, well, I'm guessing, say the last four years, something like that. So it's a relatively new development with me, but for me, psychologically or spiritually, I felt given me amazing leaps forward, which I've tried to trace in the recordings themselves. They seem very casual at times, very sort of, Mrs. Dow's diary, not superficially you would have thought not the least bit inspiring. But because they are birthed by what I felt to be inspiring at the time, some insight, some development that I feel God is on it, on my case at the time. And I've tried to communicate that to you and give some sort of record, in the hope, of course, very much, of it being a blessing to you, a rescue. In other words, I've not come as some ready-made enlightened being, avatar who, but one who is hopeful of being on the path and wants all others to be likewise as hopeful because of the joy and the peace and the fullness of life that it seems to be giving me increasingly. Now, as you know from my record, I have my downtimes as well. So there's no question of me being, the guru to follow. But I do hope a helpful example. But my real hope, of course, is that whatever path you choose, you come to have fullness of life, life abundant, life eternal, which I see, in my perhaps childish view, to be quite simply part of the family of our Heavenly Father, who loves us eternally. That's about it. Let me listen to this again. Well, I'm saying this because I'm considering this current example I'm faced with, listening to Sadhguru. He's a sort of, presented as the wise sage, a spiritual guy, and I've always been interested in the distinction of wisdom compared to philosophy, which from Plato very much became logic, although you might not think Plato's too logical in places when he's talking about pure forms and so on, and seeing darkly and so on, shadows, so forth. Philosophy has come to develop logic, even formal logic, which looks quite mathematical, which I've done a little of, and has become the assumed foundation of scientific inquiry and so on. Should I say the art of science? And science has its empirical search for validation, final validation as well, which, if you think of it, science is embodying, isn't it? And having put it that way, both the rational and the wise. From the rational, we work out what might be, and then in wisdom, we check out, does this in fact hold in practice? Is this really the way to go, or should we completely revise our rationality and come up with a different theory, that does explain what seemed to happen in practice? So that's an interesting point in itself, isn't it? But when I come to listen to this discourse on Sadhguru, I think that's the last recording and this one, I realise that I don't want to be too personal to protect others that I know, but I want to say that it has the foundation of rescue, of those that have been religious and through, well, quite honestly, the tragedies of life, come to lose it, and have then found they're unhinged. They've got a great freedom, but it seems to be a freedom with less and less hope. The freedom itself was the hope at one point. Freedom from a religion that was shackles and resulted in a life that was burdensome. My view is because they were worshipping the wrong God, someone else's God, instead of the personification of their own values. But that's my view, isn't it? And they're now at a loose end and get greatly depressed by whatever storms come along. Whereas before, with their religion, they would have weathered the storms to some degree, even with a bad religion. You know, a poor religion. A religion of worshipping someone else's God. You know, the churches, the states, one's parents' God, or whatever, you know. So I find, by the grace and the loveliness of God, I've produced 2 recordings, probably together, and certainly this one, I say certainly, but you know what I mean, seem to majorly come to the rescue of such. And I'm so overwhelmingly pleased, because this is important in the case of some dear ones that no longer holding me dear in relationship. And I would so like to rescue with all my heart. And I know that because now that I've said it, tears are in my eyes. Love you, Heavenly Dad. Thank you, Dad.